this murderous madness. Jan Barron. So now I am so proud, so pleased to introduce Barbara Doherty, I mentioned the co-author of this book, co-editor, and my partner, and someone who helped with the conception and clearly helped with the layout of this entire exhibit. Barbara.
Thank you. It's emotional being here, seeing my people here, my mom, who helped me decide to come to this school. I graduated from the Hutchins School in 1976. It was an entirely seminal time of my life, and I loved it here. Any students that are here, I would urge you to put everything you have of yourself into this experience, because sooner or later, over your lifetime, when you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you will realize how much it's helped to shape your life. And it's a fabulous university. Right here on this plot of land, I'm pretty sure, is where the Hutchins School temporary structures were when I came here. So a lot's changed, and it's a beautiful place. So I want to tell you some individual stories from the book and the exhibit. You'll see these people in the exhibit around the room. There are dozens of these stories, and there's different ways of looking at this issue, but one of them is individual decision making and the consequences and the journeys that they entail. Very personal decisions to resist during a time of war from within the military. The first, I need to go back. The first person I want to talk about is Donald Duncan. You'll see him back there on the cover of Ramparts magazine. He became very high profile for a time back then. He was a Green Beret. He was drafted in 1956. So he was actually in the military for quite a while, even before Vietnam. He was very committed and dedicated to the military. He became a specialist in intelligence and interrogation tactics. And he went to Vietnam as an advisor in 1964, so he was training other Green Berets. And he was decorated for his combat activities. But his turning point came in 1965, very, very early in the war, when he was being expected during interrogations to just turn over prisoners of war to his counterparts in the South Vietnamese military, who would then, the expectation was, torture them and or kill them. He sort of drew his line in the sand and said, no more, I give up, I'm out of here. And you can imagine someone coming to that decision after having been very straight along the line and dedicated. But it was also so early in that conflict that there was no brotherhood for him to be part of, really. He was blazing a trail, and he not only did that, but then he became a journalist, and he wrote a cover story for Ramparts that had a big impact. Yeah, right there on the exhibit. So he was, for a period of time, enormously influential in building this anti-war movement within the military. But of course, his story is not well known today or even over the last decades. I'm going to read to you a little bit of what he wrote. I had to wait until I was 35 years old, after spending 10 years in the Army and 18 months personally witnessing the stupidity of the war, before I could figure it out. Those people protesting the war in Vietnam, meaning the civilian protesters, are not against our boys in Vietnam. On the contrary, what they are against is our boys being in Vietnam. They are not unpatriotic. Again, the opposite is true. They are opposed to people, our own and others, dying for a lie, thereby corrupting the very word democracy. Another person I wanted to tell you about is Greg Payton, who is on that panel over there. He was drafted and he went to Vietnam to serve in a supply unit. He and other black soldiers were given menial jobs, but were told that they would get better jobs when newer recruits came in, which did not happen. New white recruits came in, they got higher level jobs typically. And Greg wrote in our book of what it was like to serve in these units. One time the first sergeant was talking about these gooks or something, and I replied, yeah, the gook is the same thing as a nigger. It was like a light went off. It was a real revelation, so another turning point. I was naive about a lot of things. I had to develop a racist attitude. I never was raised with that. The first sergeant told me I was a smart nigger. That's just what he said. One incident that really opened my eyes was with a white GI named Muncie from Kentucky. He was really a typical super artificial macho guy. A group of Vietnamese kids came up to our truck as we were coming back from guard duty. We had food and stuff, and we'd feed the people out in the field. We had leftover food, bushels of apples and oranges and stuff. These kids came up to the truck begging, and you could see it in their faces. These kids had that I'm hungry, feed me kind of look. So Muncie says, look at these gook kids. And he took a bite out of an apple and threw it in the dirt. And about 4 or 5 kids dove on it. It was just like when you drop a piece of bread in the fish tank. It just really set me off. I damn near threw him out of the truck and it was still moving. I was brought up on charges for that. I had three courts martial, and I went to the stockade, and it was all these black people, all these brothers. Another big turning point. The stockades really began to fill up in the mid to late 60s. Just like today, a lot of the people in the stockades were people of color, were black soldiers. And they were dealing with whole layers of injustice with the war, their own treatment within the military, and obviously the problems of the war itself. Greg took part in a major riot in a stockade there. Blocks were broken, prisoners were let out. The stockade was wrecked and burned down. He ends his essay in the book this way. I've never been as violent as I was in Vietnam. There was a lot of rage. It just began to build and build. I did so many things that were unnecessary and hurt some people, and it really wasn't their fault. But I had to take it out somewhere. I had to vent this anger in some way. Today, I work on not becoming violent. I'm scared of violence. And finally, I want to tell you about Mike Wong of San Francisco. He got his draft notice in 1968, and he was at that time undecided how he felt about the war. He was of two minds about it. He decided instead of allowing himself to be drafted, he enlisted so he could become a medic. So he says he's in the military. He says, one time we were in line for the mess hall, a really long line. We could see people whispering to each other and passing it down. And when the whisper got to me, the guy in front of me said, "They're killing women and children in Vietnam." I said, "Who's killing women and children? Viet Cong?" And he said, "No, we are." When we got to the front, we saw this newspaper rack with pictures of My Lai on the front pages. I can't describe what that did to us. There could no longer be any doubt as to who's right and who's wrong. I received orders for Vietnam and decided to go AWOL and then turn myself into the Presidio stockade, plead guilty to AWOL, and then they'd have to throw me in the stockade. That would become my permanent duty station, and I could apply for CO. They had me in the stockade for like 20 minutes, and a guard comes and pulls me back in the office. This lieutenant wants me to sign this thing, saying they're releasing me from the stockade and putting me back on Vietnam orders. And I was to proceed immediately to Oakland Army Terminal for shipment to Vietnam. My lawyer says, just sign it. So they released me, and my lawyer took me back to his office and said, they were going to stick a gun in your face and put handcuffs on you and then put you on the plane. I managed to talk them into releasing you into my custody. My legal responsibility is to take you to Oakland Army Terminal. If you resist, of course, you're a trained soldier. I can't very well stop you. I was so young and naive.